Hello, and welcome to the WMU Tool 2.0 Help Tutorial video. My name is Blaine Elliott, and I work for the Lower Mississippi Valley Joint Venture Office in Jackson, Mississippi, and I'll be leading you through this help video. The LMVJV WMU Tool 2.0 is designed to help public lands managers report the energetic capability of their water management units for waterfowl and shorebirds in the MAV and West of Coastal Plain, Ouachitas ecological regions. This video is created to assist users gain a better understanding of the fundamental definitions that frame the reporting process and the steps of that process. Use this video in conjunction with the help PDF available via the WMU Tool website to familiarize yourself with this process and the tool prior to finalizing any information that you wish to input to the database. When you arrive at the WMU Tool website homepage, you can see the principal definitions here on the right for the process. You can also see a link to the help PDF that I discussed earlier, and a link to the actual reporting database located here. Also on this page is the reset password link that you can use to recover any missing passwords that you might need. It is important to fully familiarize yourself with the definitions provided here, so let's do that now. We define a water management unit as an actively managed impounded pool of water for waterfowl and our shorebirds during appropriate times of the year. This does not include natural sloughs that flood up of their own accord due to rainfall or flooding. We account for those in another way. We further define the pool of water as the full pool definition of the impoundment, the maximum extent of water that pools up from a water control structure prior to levees being breached or structures being topped. This does not include deep water areas, and so those will need to be cut out of your full pool water management unit boundary. Always keep this full pool definition in mind when delineating or revising a water management unit polygon, because the waterfowl unit polygons and the shorebird unit polygons must reside completely within the full pool boundary definition. Within each WMU, both waterfowl and shorebird habitat can be defined spatially and the management attributes described. Previously, the joint venture WMU update tool had users report one waterfowl habitat per impoundment, but now each habitat within an impounded unit can be represented and tracked. So when you define your waterfowl unit habitat polygons, you'll be defining each and every habitat that exists within there. And we'll discuss the habitats that this tool tracks a little bit further down in the definitions. For shorebirds, you can now report mudflat drawdown zones that are intentionally exposed as shorebird habitat during the late summer shorebird migration period. When we refer to management of a waterfowl impoundment, we're referring to the name of the management area associated with that impoundment. When we talk about the management unit, we're referring to the name that you call the impoundment with regard to the habitat type that you can enter into this wetlands management unit tool. We're looking at the vegetation or general condition of the waterfowl polygon, and that can include any of the following cover types: hardwoods, corn, fallow lands, forested swamp, millet, milo, moist soil, mudflat, open aquatic areas. That's basically your deep water areas, reforested hardwoods, rice, shrub swamp, and soybean. That should include most all of the habitat cover types that you will be presented with or that you'll be cultivating. Just to get a little bit deeper in detail, hardwoods refer to largely mature bottomland forest tree species. Forested swamps refer to your cypress tupelo breaks. Open aquatic habitats refer to deep water pools greater than 18 inches deep that dabblers really can't use for foraging. They can use them for other reasons, but not for foraging purposes. Reforested hardwoods are young plantations of bottomland hardwood tree species that have not yet attained maturity. They're not yet producing enough acorns to really make a difference for waterfowl foraging. A minimal amount of red oak percentage will automatically be applied to reforested hardwoods. So whenever you are adding that information into our system, you don't need to supply an estimate of the red oak component of that forest canopy. Next, shrub swamp represents your buttonbush habitat, and the crop type should be pretty self-explanatory. Any other habitats that aren't being tracked by this database but need to be, you'll need to give me a call at my office or send me an email, and we'll try to address that at that point in time. Next, harvest percentage refers to the percent of the crop cover type that will be harvested for that specific waterfowl habitat polygon. You may have a harvest percentage for the whole impoundment, or you may not. It depends on your circumstances, but each individual waterfowl habitat polygon should have its own harvest percentage if it is a crop cover type. Obviously, you don't want to apply a harvest percentage to anything other than crop cover types. That same logic goes also to oak percentage. Oak percentage refers to the estimated percent of red oak tree species in the hardwood canopy of a waterfowl habitat unit. Each oak percentage is only applicable for hardwoods cover types, right? You don't want to put an oak percentage in moist soil polygons. You don't want to put an oak percentage in corn polygons, right? So only mature forest habitat should receive a red oak estimation. Like I said earlier, if it's reforested and not yet mature, we'll take care of that on the back end. Next, moist soil productivity. This is a relative estimation of seed productivity for moist soil habitats. Currently, this tool is tracking high, medium, and low seed productivity, just a broad estimation, but this attribute will likely evolve over time so that we're acquiring even more detailed moist soil productivity estimations. Finally, functional. This is the question of whether or not this water management unit is expected to be functional or able to hold water during the winter waterfowl season. If the answer is yes, then that's what we expect. But if the answer is no, there's no need to actually delete this water management unit from the database. We want the polygon, we want the information to stay and persist through the seasons until, and hopefully the water management unit functionality is restored. Say you breach a levee and you're not able to get in there this year or next year because it won't hold water, then but at year 3, when the levee has been repaired, then we can call this unit functional again and just change the answer to yes. All right, with those definitions now in our back pocket, let's click on the WMU tool to explore the steps behind actually reporting data. When you click on the tool, you'll be prompted for a username and password. Your username is always your email address. So I'll type mine in now. And your password will be provided by Mike Mitchell with Ducks Unlimited. If you have not received a password, contact him at mmitchell@bu.org, or you can contact me at blaine_elliott@fws.gov. Your password is required because it keeps your data protected and unalterable until you finish the data collection process. Therefore, nobody will be able to see the data that you're working on, and nobody will be able to edit or change the data you're working on until the data call is complete and we do a data collection and quality check on the data. And so feel free to, come into this data as much as you need to get what you want to input into the tool correct even at the end of the waterfowl season and just prior to the collection process being called complete, and do that as many times as you need to get the information correct and in the tool. Click OK to send your password into the tool, and now I am now in the tool, and I'll be taken to basically what we call a compliance check screen. This involves a little bit of a welcome, but also a fair warning more than anything else. We really want you guys to understand that any deviation from the standards and processes and the definitions that we've been using for over the last 3 decades with this waterfowl management capability collection process will reduce the ability to be able to compare and analyze the information, and in some ways, make it less relevant. So you must be familiar with these instructions, these steps, and these definitions before you proceed to enter the data. An important note to make here is that some of you are probably ArcGIS users. This tool works on ArcGIS software, but it is not the same as ArcGIS. It does not function the same. There are some substantial differences, and if you try to just jump into this tool without understanding these new steps, then you will have difficulties in entering your data. Do not proceed until you have listened to this video, fully vetted the help PDF that I referred to previously, and you know the definitions, you know the steps that you will be required to do the data input process. That doesn't mean you can't train and practice within the tool. You can, but just understand that there will be some hiccups, probably your first few steps as you begin to do this. So once you are ready to begin to train, or you're ready to begin to edit your WMU tool data, then you click the button here. Don't worry about leaving data incomplete, or unfinished. That is actually probably an ideal choice to make. When you, at the end of the data, at the end of, near the data collection process end, you feel like you know what happened in all of your impoundments and you can fully and capably report those into the WMU tool, then you can go ahead and complete everything and basically put a bow on it, and then we'll wrap everything up when we call the data collection complete. All right, I'm going to hit OK and then enter the tool. With the user interface, on the left is the interface tools that will basically control what we're doing with the interface. First, we have our layer list. And the layer list is a lot like the table of contents that you have in ArcGIS. First thing you see is the first 3 layers are your data layers for providing information into the WMU tool. These are the layers you're going to be working with primarily. First, you have your water management unit data layer, and it's the full pool definition boundary that we talked about earlier. Secondly, you'll have both your waterfowl habitat template and your shorebird habitat template that will persist within your water management unit boundaries. Next, you've got WMA and NWR data that can provide reference for location or boundaries and that sort of thing. And then finally, you've also got conservation easements that can also provide some, perhaps. It's loaded in there in case you need it. Finally, at the bottom of the list, we have our past units. These are our previous collected data from our WMU data collection calls over the years. And this is the contributions of all the public land managers in the joint venture that have been adding data. And what we have right now is your last data that you provided to us in 2013, 2014 loaded. This is going to be a valuable tool that we'll get to later and include in the process that we're going to for contributing data. Up against the top again, we've got our review filter. The review filter assists users in knowing whether you've reviewed all the impoundment data that you're responsible for, so that no data goes unexamined or unimproved. The third button across the top is our upload data feature that allows the importing of polygon data into the database. You can see we've got a series of possible data types that you can provide, all zipped up. And this can be a real useful feature if you have impoundments with complicated boundaries that you've GPSed over time, or you've got a bunch of polygons and you don't want to have to start over again from scratch. Then this can be useful for adding your WMU full pool boundary polygon. Next, we've got our base map gallery. The base map gallery is the same as you've seen in ArcGIS. It can be, some of this imagery, if you apply it, can be extremely helpful in delineating that full pool boundary line where the wet soil changes to dry soil. And so feel free to take advantage of that where it's useful for you. Finally, this fifth button, info button, provides you a link to the help document, the PDF that you should be looking at right now while you're going through this process, and also the locations of and what the buttons do. If you've forgotten, while you're not listening to this video, what each of these buttons are for, then this helps guide you a little bit there. Finally, this area right up in here, we'll address next. These buttons are your zoom in, zoom out buttons, obviously. The default extent button gets you back to this screen, and your My Location can be set for your local vicinity, so you can zoom into that easily. And you've got an address bar up here as well, so that you can zoom in to some known locations, although it doesn't have just every WMA place or NWR place in the system. it does allow you to use that somewhat if you prefer. And then we get to the main players, the main buttons that we're going to be using in the adding data and editing data process. This is the Add WMU button, also called the Geoprocessing button. And this is the Edit Data button. And we'll be using those extensively throughout the rest of this tutorial. Okay, let's go back to the layer list. You'll notice that there are no current WMUs or waterfowl habitats showing up in my screen. That's because that I haven't added any new data yet. So once we start populating with new data for this new data call, then these habitats will start showing up. Also, let's turn on our past units or previous WMUs, and you see that they start showing up. And I want to make a note here that, since the app is password protected, any new data that you're working on or you've added during a data collection season, that stays secure until the data call is complete and has been checked for errors. Nobody can look at it, nobody can edit it, nobody can alter it in any way. But once it's finalized, we'll be archiving your past information here on the tool so that you can turn on other data layers and you can see what you've done in the past, and it can provide some value for you if you want to look at how things changed over time. So we want to make sure that you have that capability to have previously archived data as well. But this past unit data is also going to help us in each data collection process. So let's zoom in with our scroll button, and I'll just pick here next to this National Wildlife Refuge. And zoom in a little bit. Remember, I've got my base map gallery that I can turn on if I want to look at how the habitat lies underneath, particularly if I want to see the wet line in the soil. And now I can zoom in and create my new water management units. This is the first thing we want to cover in this tutorial for the data collection process, is creating a new water management unit polygon. Remember, this is that full pool definition. We'll click the Add WMU button here and select the polygon tool. Drag this guy out of the way a little bit. And I'm going to use my mouse to begin clicking the edges, the boundary of my water management unit polygon. Now, if I want to complete the polygon, I double click it to complete. But if I decide, no, I don't like where those vertices landed, I'm going to come back over here and click the polygon tool and begin again. If I decide, sorry about that. If I decide to, let me just turn this layer off because that's going to keep happening. If I decide to come in and say, I double click it and I still don't like it, I can always hit the red delete polygon and it will disappear. But let's add background layer, and let's say I decide to come in and create the polygon, and I'm going to keep it this time. Before I can say I'm done, I have to add the attribute information for this particular water management unit. One tip here is to open up this pop-up window so that you can fully see all the attributes that you'll need to be modifying for this process. And it should, all these windows should stay open. Once you open that first one, you won't have to do that again every time. So that way you'll always know that they're the full extent of the values that you're going to need to edit. So let's come in here and let's say we'll leave these two alone. I'll say this is Catahoula. It's not, but I'll just say it is. And I'll call the name of the unit blame. My habitat type, I will be setting for the major habitat type in this location. This can be easily too hung up on the habitat type at this point, and we'll just call it we'll call it hardwoods, and then we can set our oak percentage and harvest percentage. We'll just leave those blank for now, and we'll have our moist soil productivity set at null, and it's functional, and we're also going to create some shorebird habitat. So we've now got our polygon set for our WMU full pool boundary, and we've got our attribute selected, and we are adding shorebird habitat. So when so when we hit run, everything that we have created will be sent to the WMU tool database. It'll take a few seconds. You'll notice it says executing, and you see the process bars here. Once it's stopped executing, you shift it back to the input tab, and you notice that nothing has changed. But if we select the red delete button, our polygon that we drew is now deleted from our screen only. So if we toggle up and down a little bit, everything that we've just created comes into view. Switching back to our layer list over here, we can see that we now have a water management unit outlined in purple, a waterfowl habitat template in light blue, and a shorebird habitat template showing in light orange color. Okay, so now that we've got our waterfowl and shorebird habitat polygons created, we can go on to the next step. So to begin editing our waterfowl habitat polygon, let's get rid of this pop-up box, and need to make a strong note of caution right here. When you edit the data in this WMU tool, any of the three layers that you have visible over here in the layer list can be edited at the same time. Now, this is different. This is very different from what you've probably experienced before with ArcGIS, okay? And you can control what you're editing by what you make visible in the layer list. So if we want to edit just the waterfowl data, habitat data, we turn off the shorebird and we turn off the water management unit data, and now we can edit just the polygon data associated with the waterfowl habitat. This is our template that we'll be using to subset into our various habitats that we have in this particular impoundment. Okay, to begin, we turn on the edit data button, and we select the polygon that we're going to be editing. You can see it highlights in blue. Now this box will pop up, but we don't need it yet, so we're going to turn it off for right now. Still can edit what we're looking at right here. To subset the waterfowl habitat data, we're going to use our cut tool, the pair of scissors that you see on the box. The cut tool is going to allow us to subset this by clicking outside the polygon first, clicking inside the polygon to line up the boundary of the particular habitat that we're going to be providing information on, and then clicking outside the polygon again to complete the cut. So I'll do that now. See a red line shows up, and I'll carefully outline the edge of my habitat so that I can distinguish it from the other habitats that are within this impoundment. And I double click to finish. If I didn't like that cut, the way that before you complete the cut, if you want to just say, no, I don't like that, I don't want to complete this cut, you just click on the cut button and it lets you restart. But once you make the cut is there. You have to restart your waterfowl habitat polygon all over again if you make a cut and you go ahead and complete it and you don't like it. Okay, so that's a word of caution there also. So now let's click on the new habitat you created, and you notice the waterfowl habitat information attribute table pops up. And this is where we can subset and categorize each of our waterfowl habitats for this impoundment into its separate and own its unique information. So for this one, we're going to even though we've said that this is a hardwood unit primarily, we're going to call this little corner over here, we'll say it's corn. Obviously it doesn't have a red oak percentage, and we don't want you to put anything in there. For ag, if it's ag, obviously you don't have a red oak percentage, so we need logical responses there. For our harvest percentage, we're going to say it's 60% harvested, meaning 40% was left for waterfowl. We're going to leave most soil productivity blank. Now, back to our definition for functional, since we know that this is a unit that can hold water this winter, we're going to say this is functional. And since it's a new polygon that we've just created, then automatically it's going to come up as it's been reviewed. Okay. And so if we like the way that's all been saved there, we'll hit save, and now it will be added to the database. Then you just continue this process for the rest of your habitats. Say you have some other habitats over here, maybe this part over here is more soil, then you create a polygon over there and attribute it appropriately, and then you can leave the rest of the habitat as primarily hardwoods. And you can click on that if you want to further attribute that, add that red oak percentage now that we didn't add originally. Okay. You can also edit the individual vertices of a particular polygon if you want. Now this is a little tricky, and so you don't want to do this unless you have a good reason to. But if you double click inside here, you can see that all the vertices will pop up. If we zoom in real tight, we can see that we can pull the vertices and alter the polygon that we've created. But you have to be careful doing this, because we really do, since this is a full pool definition template, we don't want any gaps to be left within the full pool of water, unless it's like something like a deep water area, or if it's some other type of habitat that water is not covering. But we want the full polygon to be completely represented. So let's keep those in there as best we can. But if we need to alter them somewhat, we need to move this guy in a little bit or something like that, then you do have the option to be able to do that. But you have to be very careful with when you do this and how you do this, because you really don't want to create a lot of little splinter holes or gaps in the full pool coverage of your habitats. Once you click the edit tool to close it, your changes will then be saved. Now, let's go on to edit our shorebird habitat info. Remember that we have to ensure that if we want to edit just shorebird habitat, that only shorebird habitat is appearing over here in the layer list. If we click on the shorebird habitat polygon that we're looking at, and then click the edit button, edit widget, we can now use our cut tool to define our shorebird habitat in this area. And let's say that our drawdown zone, the mud flat that we're going to be creating for shorebirds, is going to follow this line somewhat. Zoom over a little bit and double click that, and now we have a shorebird habitat drawdown zone that we can see is labeled correctly here. If we click this area down here, we switch this to non-shorebird habitat. Hit save on this one, back up to this one, and we now have our shorebird habitat and our non-shorebird habitat for this impoundment. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is to take a water management unit polygon from previously entered data and then add it to the WMU tool as both shorebird, waterfowl, and water management unit data polygons. We realize that delineating waterfowl habitat polygons on every WMU you manage can be quite a challenge. I mean, you've entered this data in before, and now you're having to enter it in again, but now you're having to enter it in again and subset it into these smaller units. So we have a little bit of a shortcut for you here, okay? This is a way that we can take our persisting water management unit full pool polygons from our archive data set and add them to the new data collection process. To do that, we look at, let's just zoom over a little bit, scroll over and look at this persisting water management unit from previous data collection. And we want to make sure that it kind of fits our understanding of full pool definition. And we know from looking at it that, yes, this is something that we want to keep and just move over into the new data collection. All right, so if we click on it to make it highlighted, as you see it is now, and then you click on the lower right-hand corner ellipsis, set of 3 little dots there, you can see that we can set this as an input of geoprocessing. So we do that. We open up the same sort of habitat attribute table that we've seen before. Oh, let's do something before we do that though. Let's make sure since we want to do for waterfowl, WMU, and shorebird all, let's make sure we have all 3 of those on, right? All right, now we set this as input of geoprocessing, and now go through here and make sure that we've got everything that we needed. Change that to 10. It's no longer fallow, like it says here in the data table. It's now been planted as soybeans. It's going to be harvested at 50%, and it is going to be functional, and we are going to create shorebird habitat. So once we're happy with the selections we made and we filled everything out, we'll hit run. And again, we'll switch to the output tab at the top, and it looks like it quickly did it. So we switch back to input, And to ensure that we actually have created it, what we need to do is click the edit tool off for that polygon and turn the past units off so that we can see that we now have a waterfowl habitat template, a shorebird habitat template inside the full pool WMU boundary that we brought over from the previous data collection. You can now edit this just as we did previously and subset the waterfowl habitat data into its individual habitats and set the shorebird drawdown zone just like we've done in previous exercises. If all you want to do is to update the management info, the prescription for waterfowl habitat polygon, meaning that the habitat polygon spatially hasn't changed, it's the correct shape, but there was either a change in the management prescription for a new season, or the prescription remained the same as the previous season, but the shape is still the same. Then the way you do that, let's click off of that. Let's look at just our waterfowl habitat, and we select the polygon that we're interested in editing, choose the edit tool, and we open up the attribute tables and we make the changes as appropriate. We can change it to correct the habitat. It's actually rice instead of soybean, and it was 50% harvested. And when we hit save, we can save it that way. This is particularly handy, or it will be particularly handy next year for the data call when you have a habitat that hasn't changed and the shape hasn't changed. Everything is status quo, it's left as is, but we want to make sure that it is reviewed in the data collection process. And once you assure us that it has been reviewed and it has been updated, then you can hit save. Maybe in a future data call, your waterfowl habitat need to be updated. You basically need to start all over from scratch. Even though the full pool definition might remain the same, there will be a need for you to redefine the habitats within there. And you don't really want to have to go in and start everything from scratch back to step one. So the way we do that is to, let's say we want to just do it for our waterfowl habitat. Our shorebird habitat and our water management unit full pool definition is going to remain static, but we're going to change these habitats. Remember, we've got our 3 different habitats in here now: moist soil, hardwoods, and corn. And we want to start all over again from scratch. This may be an issue with rotation, whatever your reasons might be. You want to just start all over again from scratch. So to do that, we choose our edit tool and we go down to this option here, which says create a new selection. So we're going to use that to draw a red rectangle around the units that we're going to now union or unite with this tool here. And that merges all of the selected habitat polygons back into a single waterfowl habitat template once again. You can now begin to subdivide that as you need. I have presented another option to you before, where you go in and edit each of the vertices individually. But that's not really preferred because, of that whole issue of leaving gaps that we've kind of confronted already. You always want to have a single, or not a set of waterfowl habitat polygons, light blue polygons, across the entirety of the full pool water management unit. And so this is the more preferred way, using the union option. So what if you wish to add outside data created locally, into the WMU tool for editing? If you have created water management unit polygons locally via GPS or shapefiles, etc., you can add this data into the WMU tool via the Upload Data button located in your upper toolbar here. This option can be particularly useful for complicated water management unit polygons or for numerous waterfowl management unit polygons. When you click this button, you see that there are a variety of data types that this option supports, from shapefiles, GPX, KMLs, etc. When you hit the Browse button, it will take you to the Windows Explorer capability on your local machine. Go to the location, the files in Windows Explorer, and choose the files associated with that data. Now, all this data has to be previously zipped up in a zip file. In order to do that, you select all the data associated with that water management unit, and then you hit right click and send a zip file, compress folder here, and that will get everything bundled up into a zip file that the tool can support uploading. So with our new zip file, our new zip folder created, we come up to the Upload Data button on our toolbar and select Browse to take us to our Windows Explorer tool on your local drives. Locate where the new zip folder is created, and then we add that into the WMU tool. You can see that the tool takes you directly to the new shapefile or set of new polygon or set of polygons, whatever the case may be. And if we left click on this new shape and left click on the ellipsis in the bottom right hand corner here, you can set this as input of add WMU, and it will allow us to set attributes for this new shape, new polygon. I'm going to call it Elliott 7. It's more soil with high productivity and shorebird habitat. I'll hit run and note that it's executing. Quickly processed it. I can switch to input, but I actually can go ahead and X these two windows out here and go back to my layer list and see that the new shape is in here. Turn that new shape off and see that it is now added into the actual WMU tool as a shorebird unit, a waterfowl unit, and as a water management unit. And then from this point you can proceed with divvying up the habitats for waterfowl and shorebird as we presented in other parts of this tutorial. That pretty much covers most all the situations that you will need to know the steps for providing your data and uploading it into the WMU tool. If there's anything that we haven't covered, then we can work through that with you. This application is a pretty stable program. It's well written, it's well constructed. But if you have any problems with it, my first suggestion is to just do a restart on the web page. You know, just refresh it, reload it, and put in your credentials, your username and your password again, and go back and try to do the process again. Hopefully that will rectify any issues that you have. There are some glitches that we just don't have control over. They're primarily Esri programming that we just don't have the ability to control from our seats. And so there might be something like that that pops up and you just need to do a refresh. And hopefully that will take care of any problems that you might have. If you have any other issues or other problems or questions about the process, the definitions, or the steps, you're always welcome to give me a call. My numbers for my work phone are 601-206-5457, but I'm working a lot from home now, so my cell number is 601-415-0999. If we need to, we can get on a Teams call and you can see my screen, I can see your screen, and we can share like that and work through a problem or any other question that or issue that might arise. We can work through that with you also. So just give me a call or send me an email and we can set something up. Finally, I'd just like to share a word of thanks to each of you for taking your time to do this and your attention to detail with this. I know that all of you are very busy out there, but your involvement in this process goes a long way to bettering our understanding of our waterfowl populations, their needs on the wintering grounds, and what we can do to improve in that area. So again, thank you very much.